Should you wear Google's Wear OS? And which flavor is more your taste? Samsung's shiny, bright Galaxy Watch 4 or Mobvoi's rugged, long-lasting TicWatch Pro 3 Ultra? Let's figure it out together.
Goedendag, weer DHRME, do
Honest,
reviews,
more
entertaining. In terms of performance and ease of use, both of these watches are similar. They're quite snappy. The Samsung isn't perfect and sometimes struggles to open apps quickly, but it is more fluid, whereas there were cases of the TicWatch being quite jittery after trying to open up an app or navigating through the watch. But still on a day-to-day basis, both are fine.
These watches may be round, but that's about where the physical similarities end. You navigate both by using touch gestures as well as the two push buttons on the right side. Samsung also has a digital bezel, which seems a little unnecessary, even though it works fairly well. TicWatch has a physical bezel, which will give your screen a tiny bit of protection, whereas you can easily expose the Samsung watch to scratch unfriendly surfaces. The TicWatch also has those classic chronograph pushers, whereas Samsung went the stealthy route with push buttons more flush with the case. We'd prefer the Samsung here because if you wear your watch on your left wrist, the pushers on the TicWatch feel like they dig into your hand. The watch case itself is surprisingly made out of a mix of stainless steel and plastic for the TicWatch and aluminium on the Samsung. Both seem durable. We have a ding on the Samsung, but that's probably because we've been using it a little longer. Although the marketing on the TicWatch is very rugged and adventure-friendly with its 810G military specification and IP68 water resistance, we were pleasantly surprised to know that Samsung, in terms of specs, is no different. Even the strap used on both are made from fluoro rubber, meaning they can resist higher temperatures and a mix of aggressive fluids, like Rowan's sweat.
And Kevin's hair.
My hair is not a fluid.
You're a fluid. Overall, it doesn't take away from the fact that the TicWatch is noticeably bigger than the Samsung. The Samsung is more compact, sleek, comfortable, and generally fuckman friendly, almost forgetting that we even have it on. The TicWatch is another story. It's chunky and you and others in the room won't miss it. It's still comfortable, but for smaller wrists, since there's some overhang to the watch, it can get caught on shirt cuffs. It doesn't seamlessly disappear into day-to-day use, but with great watch size comes great displayability. And the TicWatch has 47 millimeters of screen real estate versus 40 on the Samsung, or 44, depending on which size you get. A bigger display means you can read text comfortably, which is why we like the TicWatch. It's just nicer to read stuff on it, notifications, and even respond because of the larger screen. On the Samsung, it feels like a device which is like, hey, I got a notification, let me get my phone. Speaking of that screen quality though, there's just no contest here. The Samsung is just beautiful and crisp as one would expect from Samsung. Visibility outdoors is also nowhere close. The Samsung is noticeably brighter and both feature an AMOLED display, but the difference lies not only in the quality of the display but also the number of pixels per inch. 326 per inch on the TicWatch compared to 530 on the Samsung. That's a huge difference, but it explains that beautiful screen and the lackluster battery life.
TicWatch is all about rugged utility with a large battery, large screen, and there's only one color and size you can get it in. The Samsung appeals more to the fashion conscious by offering two sizes, the 40mm that we have or a larger 44mm. Apart from that, you can also pick from 3 different colors and not to mention the strap choices as well. Both these watches have their own proprietary charging connector or charging puck. Again here, the Samsung seems to have a more tight, secure fit, whereas the connector for the TicWatch is flimsy and easily gets dislodged. And this is kind of a theme when it comes to these two watches. Samsung also one-ups the TicWatch by supporting fast charging to juice it up for a short while and get a considerable amount of use out of it. However, if you charge from 0 to 100%, then either watch is going to take a similar amount of time, which in our testing was around 2 hours, the Samsung being ever so slightly quicker. We use both of these watches with the always-on display because there's just something about having to flick your wrist or tap the screen every time you need to glance over at the time. The bulky TicWatch boasting battery life as a unique selling point kind of lives up to that hype. It lasted us about 50 hours versus the promised 72 hours on a single charge. Samsung tapped out around the 24-hour mark. Speaking of that TicWatch hype, they also offer what they call Essential Mode, which essentially puts the watch into a basic smartwatch mode. This will remind you of those old school Casio watches, but it is considerably smarter since it still shows you the time, date, step counter, heart rate, and battery life. In this mode, you could get up to 45 days of battery life. 45 days, Rohit.
We've not tested that.
No. Which in our opinion ticks a lot of boxes.
TicWatch comes pre-installed with Tick Health apps, which you cannot uninstall. Who knew staying in health required bloatware? And Samsung has Samsung Health, which you're stuck with as well. We immediately installed Google Fit on both watches because, hey, we want our data to be fed into an app which is not dependent on any of these watches and can be on any phone. However, if you want to get the most out of the health features, then Google Fit won't cut it. Some features are only supported on their proprietary apps. In order to track this, you will need to install the Samsung Health app or the Mobvoi app. Speaking of the features, we've compared all of Samsung's various sensors with actual professional medical grade equipment in this video. And to be honest, they do fairly well. So don't forget to add that to your watch next list. Get it? Watch next.
But comparing the two devices, we saw significant differences in a number of the measurements. Number one, sleep tracking. Samsung tends to count awake, light, and REM sleep much higher than the TicWatch, which seems to think we're sleeping deeper for longer. 2. Samsung's blood oxygen saturation measurements were in the range of 80 to 100% consistently, whereas the TicWatch always had us above 90%. 3. In terms of exercise, recording them on Google Fit seemed to work flawlessly. However, the TicWatch was a little less reliable. The one time I tried to use the Tic Exercise app for recording a workout, there was no data recorded. Whereas the Samsung Health app, everything seems to work well every time. Yeah. And we tested with the Samsung Galaxy S21 and a Google Pixel 6, so the phone had nothing to do with it. Okay, which number are we on again? We're on 5. The TicWatch also has a smaller range for heart rate, whereas the Samsung shows a wider variability. Yeah. With the higher heart rates being higher on the Samsung. We're on 6. No, we're miscounting. Whatever. It's the next point. For the ECG and blood pressure, you will need the Health Monitor app on a Samsung phone with the Samsung Watch, whereas the TicWatch doesn't even offer these features. Other basic tracking like step counting, calorie counting, etc., the measurements are very similar. However, on the Samsung, recently we haven't been able to measure body composition.
Yeah, and when I used it the first time, for the first few weeks, it worked fine, and although I did have hiccups with it now and then, I was able to record the data. Yeah. Now it doesn't seem to register for either of us. Hopefully fixable with a software update, but it's annoying that a feature that was working well has basically stopped working.
We're going to have to reach out to Samsung for this.
Yeah. Samsung, are you listening? Another thing that sometimes stresses us out is the smart in these smartwatches. These watches do have really mixed extras. After all the jokes on it, you'd think that Bixby would be a joke. And yes, while it doesn't have Google Assistant smarts, it can't even send text messages, it can at least do the basics like making and receiving calls. Out of the box, you're saddled with Bixby on the Samsung, which you can't change, and Samsung Pay and Health, which you can swap out with Google Pay and Google Fit if you want. We personally think both the apps are fairly decent apps, even though they kind of lock you in. When it comes to the TicWatch, you get Google Assistant, so the world is at your wrists for random questions about the heights of skyscrapers and the ages of politicians. However, basics like making calls or sending text messages don't work with the TicWatch, even though strangely you can receive calls. Go figure. You will have to stick to the Tic apps though, which is a little disappointing. And that's another thing. It's not one app on the watch, but separate apps for sleep, pulse, health, exercise, hearing. What's going on there?
Zen and whatnot. Okay.
Yeah.
And hey, since we cover a lot of audio related products on this channel, subscribe if you haven't already. There's also integration of the Samsung Buds apps on the Samsung, where you can quickly switch noise cancelling modes. We didn't find any special integration with Mobvoi's earbuds A and C, but you can pair them using Bluetooth like any other buds and go for a run with nothing but your watch and your buds. Preferably some clothes? Yeah, wear some clothes when you go on a run. One downside of the TicWatch is the vibrations. Now, I'm sure some of you will enjoy this level of vibration for your own reasons, and we ain't judging, but the loud vibrations are so loud that you can literally hear the watch in a quiet room. I mean, isn't the point of vibrations that you feel them and you don't hear them? The Samsung haptic motor is much more refined and does a good job. Like the watch itself, the haptics are understated and subtle.
Yeah, let's talk about Wear OS. The Wear OS versions on these two watches right now are different, 3.0 on Samsung and 2.33 on TicWatch. So we hope for a software update on the TicWatch soon. But in either case, while you won't get Apple Watch levels of app selection, there are still a fair few apps to choose from. Just remember though that this kind of feels like the early days of Android with a lot of third-party, hacky, buggy apps, and not the refined Android that we have today.
So, which one should you choose? Both of these are similarly priced around 300 euros right now, but that can change. Check out the links in the description for the latest prices, and maybe you catch a good deal, especially at this time of the year.
Yeah.
But assuming that they're priced similarly, here's our lowdown. Get the Samsung Galaxy Watch 4 if you want a sleek watch with a gorgeous screen and a whole host of sensors for things like body composition, when it works, blood pressure, ECG to measure your various bodily functions.
Yeah, and get the TicWatch Pro 3 Ultra if you want a beast of a watch, both looks-wise, but also in the battery life department. If you're someone who often forgets to charge your devices, you'll appreciate all those extra weeks of battery life in essential mode. Both are relatively future-proof since they're based on Wear OS, but Samsung does usually have a superior after-sales service network in most countries, so that might be something to consider as well.
You've been watching Our Wrists, and we've been DH RME.
Namaste.